case, did my folks make it here? Oh, good. It's not all about how bad advice parents give and all that, okay? So we're okay. All right. I thought I would talk to you a little bit about failure, and since I'm likely to do that here, I welcome your critique in any form. In any human endeavor, there is an inevitable gaps between intention, expectation, and realization. A lot is made of what to do about those gaps, how to shorten them, how not to be stymied by them, but not much is made out of how to embrace them, and that's what I thought I would talk to you about today. This is my son, Owen. He's a big baseball player. I never played the game, but I love it now. Failure is woven into the game, right? To hit the ball 1 out of every 3 times you get up would be like a Hall of Fame career. Pitching, the numbers are even worse. Out of 400,000 or so games pitched in professional baseball, there have only been 23 perfect games. So there's this way that everybody who plays baseball has to learn how to come up to bat, go to the pitching mound while fully, rightfully expecting failure to intend nonetheless to get a hit, to pitch the perfect game. And that feels to me like the way that it really is in real life. It feels like if I am accepting the challenges that life is presenting to me fully, really, then to expect anything more than 30%, 33% would be absolutely absurd, crazy. You probably don't recognize this as the facade of this very building. This show is called Galway Shadow, and we worked with over 36 overhead projectors and 60 puppeteers to bring this facade to life. The intention of this show, the intention of most every show at Redmoon, is to animate public space, to make it a place of unexpected connection and community. I believe, I intend for this form of theater to revitalize democracy. Nothing short of that. I had a friend recently who had the opportunity to talk to Cory Booker, mayor of Newark, and ask him what he thought his greatest challenge was, and his answer was very simple: to convince people that things can be different. Isn't that right? I mean, I'll just speak for myself that I battle on pretty much an everyday basis my own lethargy and cynicism and faithlessness, and I think that that ability to imagine and to inspire myself to believe that things can be different is the key. I make these shows to show people and myself that things can be different. I was never a fan of this plaza, actually. It always felt like a pretty awful place for a museum whose theme was Fear No Art, to have this relationship of the plaza that was so kind of, to me, antisocial and intimidating, and seemed to defy congregation, seemed to intimidate. And so we developed this show to counteract that. On the evenings of these performances, people came out and hung out and lay their heads against backpacks or pulled out long chairs or their blankets, and they sat and they watched this animated, kind of a comic book really, but done with people, this complicated choreography, in fact, of 60 people moving tiny pieces of acetate in separate rooms, unable to see or even hear one another. And we had developed this very complicated system of naming each of the rooms and putting letters on each of the floors. And so it was a kind of weird game of battleship where we would say A2, go, B3, go, 1, 2, and that was the motion, 1, 2, 3, 4. This show, like most of the things we did, failed. It failed because it kind of flattened out, and incredibly, despite all of that energy, it became a two-dimensional surface. It became a giant television screen, and the audience took that same passive relationship toward it that they had learned about their television screens. But this became clear at the show's conclusion when the performers sort of stepped between the projector and the screen to cast their shadows for a curtain call, and in that moment, you could hear in the audience this kind of audible gasp They absorbed the event for what it was, a live event, a living phenomena, some crazy congregation of creative energy of probably over 150 to 200 artists performing and coming together on a single night to create a single moment of transformation. The failure pointed to its success. Our headlines are of catastrophic weather, of crime and other forms of aberrant behavior, of disease and economic turmoil and cheating. To even the most hard-hearted, this would inspire fear and insecurity and promote reclusivity, and indeed it has, right? We move generally from one pod to the next, from our domestic pods, our homes, to our vehicular pods, our cars, to the office pods, computer-reinforced cubicles, and then back again. And even when not in one of those, and sometimes when we are, we have our virtual pods and pads to keep us insulated. Even those activities that seem ideally suited to social interaction have become sources of communal isolation. Our public spaces are being defied and reshaped by the private experiences of pods and pads. Our friends across the globe have never been closer, but the people, kind of immediately approximate, have never really been further away. Doesn't have to be this way, but it takes an enormous act to breach that distance. It can be a catastrophic weather event, it can be a professional sports victory, it can be the death of a celebrity or a superstar, but it can also be a cultural event. This, for example, is a public square during the Tomatina festival in Spain, a harvest festival. Here is the Indian Color Festival, the running of the bulls, the Kumbh Mela in India, Day of the Dead, Mardi Gras. These events, they breach the distance. They trigger the social impulse. They provide the kind of visceral counter-incentive necessary to yank us out of our profit-generating virtual connections and into real time and real space, and more than that, into a kind of emotional space, a space where every breached gap shortens the distance between. Fear is reduced and care is increased. I didn't start making theater until relatively late, actually. It was in college, and I became fascinated with the ancient Greeks. I don't know why. But I was really intrigued by this thing that they would close down the city for 3 days, and they had everybody go, aristocrat, slave alike, go to the theater for 3 days straight. So they saw some of the bawdiest comedies ever written, guys running around with huge phalluses wagging about, and some of the best tragedies ever written. Theater was a kind of demonstration of the commonality. What started then in the theater soon sort of needed to go outdoors where I could speak to a broader band of public. Sometimes failure is just that, failure. In the next scene, the monster's head, this was an early production of Frankenstein. It happened on Navy Pier. We processed down the pier with all these huge puppets, and then we took those big grand steps leading up to the Ferris wheel, and we did a short performance there. And then this was the final moment of the performance when the monster's head would sort of tip back in the next scene, and he would expel forth his soul, a white gauze version of himself. And for some reason that I still can't configure, we decided at the last moment to paint this gauze thing with red paint. And it has thus been named the Tampon on a Stick. And its status as our worst failure ever goes unchallenged. Sometimes, though, failure can show the promise of effort. Sometimes failure is a finger pointing to somewhere else. It's the human effort sitting side by side with the beautiful ideal, with the aspiration to arrive there. So the failure doesn't gloss the effort, it actually punctuates it. In the spring of 2006, we devised this show. It was in the Columbia Basin behind the Museum of Science and Industry, and it was really intending to sort of reveal Olmsted's unbelievably beautiful landscape architecture of that area. So that was to be in August of 2006, and a week before our opening, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. And so suddenly our newspapers and news programs were filled with these kinds of images, and nothing that we were doing made any sense any longer, because it had been designed as a kind of clown show on water, and now nothing having to do with floods was funny at all. So in the last week, we rewrote the entire event, and in one of the scenes, we had a blanket vendor working his way across the lagoon from west to east. And since this was a week later, the weather from the hurricane had now moved all the way up here to the Midwest. So it was rainy and blustery every single evening. And no matter how early we sent this guy to make his way across the lagoon, he was late for his cue. And so we all sat watching as this mad paddling as he made his way. So the band, who was on a raft as well, and the performers, and everybody sat and watched this mad effort of a man against the elements, rather than be digested as the tremendous awkward moment that it really was in real life. It just pulled your heart out. It was just a tremendously emotional moment. And that was the case of the whole show, really. And this is where I had the whole thought about failure, where I understood what was happening there, because that show was really a failure on a whole bunch of levels, by any standard of my own at least. It never found its rhythm. It was faulting and halting and faltering, and it just didn't have the time. But somehow, because of the situation, because we had been experiencing these images one after another in photographic form and through the media, there was a way, sitting there in the reality of water, in the reality of paddling across this lagoon, in the reality of that, made this event kind of unstoppable emotionally. Every time we go out, we fail. It's in the nature of the project. Sam Beckett has this famous quote: "Ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better." So I've created systems around this truth. The annual event is one such system. We try, we fail, we try again, we fail better. I have this irrational love of Halloween, and I think, Mom and Dad, this comes from the evening that you came home and found the dining room table tipped over and ceramic everywhere and shards of glass, and me running after my two older brothers with a stick in my hand, and I was grounded from Halloween. And so I actually had to watch the parade of costumed characters come to our front door from my bedroom window. And since then, I've had this crazy love for Halloween, to the point where when Barack Obama invited us to the White House to perform for Halloween, I helped with the show and all, but I stayed home to trick-or-treat with my kids, which they still resent. We created, at the time in the early 90s, I was living in Logan Square, and there was, I don't know if you remember, but there was a lot of media hype around Halloween, about hypodermic needles and candy and shards of razor blades and violence and all this stuff, and it was just squelching urban Halloween. And so we decided we would do something. We did the simplest thing we could do. We just got a whole bunch of drummers and some bamboo and rice paper lanterns, and we began to process through the Logan Square residential neighborhood. And then we tried to light something on fire, but it was raining, so it didn't light. So we failed. But we came back the next year, and we decided to exploit the success of that event, which was, as we went through the residential neighborhood, curtains began to pop up right and left, and people came out into their stoops, and some people joined us, and some people didn't, but it was just this reckless, very fun, extravagant evening. And so we made that the feature of the event. So we had now noisemakers to give away, and rice paper and bamboo lanterns to give away, and people came out and they joined us. And by the time we arrived to the square, we had over 300 people, which at the time was huge to us there. And each year it got bigger. The following year we decided to make those connections even more tangible. So we began to work with community organizations. We made these crazy pairings. We paired up the gang intervention program with the Senior Citizen Center. We paired up a South American group of quilters from the Association House with a group home for the obsessive compulsive. And together, we created these crazy installations along the boulevard that actually invited interaction from people. So one of them, the one that I think of most favorably at the time, was you would come and write on a piece of paper the name of somebody who had passed that year. And then you would give that piece of paper to one of the kids from the gang intervention program, and they put it and attached it to a balloon. And then the balloon was attached to a series of wires, and the wires were attached to ladders growing in size. And so the wires went up, and they reattached. Atop each ladder was perched one of these kids, and they would reattach the wire to the next one until finally it was let go into the sky and floated away. Over 10,000 people eventually came to this event on a single night. It was wildly successful, beyond what we ever imagined, really. The spectacle got bigger, the installations got bigger. Of course, there's a paradox to the injunction to fail, right? To succeed, to fail is to fail, to fail, to fail is to succeed. I don't know what happened in Logan Square, but I know that when I moved in 1992, there wasn't much there. There was a currency exchange. The Logan Square Auditorium was pretty much vacant every night and had a wedding every now and again. And by 2004, the first Starbucks moved in, and now, there's an artist consignment shop, and two of the best restaurants, according to the Chicago Tribune of this year, are there. And there's an Italian patisserie, and so it's changed. I know that they no longer need a Halloween event there. This is our second attempt at that show in the facade here, and we failed better. We called it Astronaut's Birthday. It was directed by Frank Maugeri and scripted by Tria Smith. Human connection is messy and unpredictable. It challenges control, and that's why we keep pushing it further and further away. So we've moved from a kind of society, culture, community based on the relative randomness of physical proximity to communities of our own design navigated behind a computer screen or through our mobile devices, right? We moved from spontaneous popovers and serendipitous encounters to texts and emails and iChats and all that. Each form is really permitting less and less spontaneous improvisation, less and less human leakage, right? Like sick parents or financial matters or heartaches. The American dream is not home ownership. The American dream is selective participation. Privilege is not best measured by the size of one's home or car, but it's actually the distance one can maintain from the public concern. We deploy our money in increments to remove us from the public square. First, we begin to go to cafes and bookstores in order to avoid the library, and cars take over mass transportation, and private coaching and travel leagues overtake the spontaneous kickball games and kick the can and around midnight, and we don't go to the parks, and we don't, because we go to fitness clubs, et cetera, until the final picture here is we're living in gated communities with private policing, private transportation, et cetera, et cetera. This is parenthetically the kind of undeniable appeal of Republican dogma, right? It's aspirational. We all do believe that we are better in control of our own lives. One of the things that we began to do is when we very first started the theater is we were working in paper mache, and we were basically the stuff of a messy kids art class, and we were coincidentally down the street from Chase Elementary School, which was one of the 12 schools on probation at the time for the city of Chicago because the level of student achievement was so very low. And we started with the fact that we couldn't keep these kids away from us, so we were like, okay, we're going to start a kids art class. You can only come on Saturdays, but it's a free kids art class. Come on Saturdays and we'll figure something out together. And we began to make shows with them. And one of the shows we began to make really was that Halloween show. But at a certain point, the girls in particular, began to drop out. They were being harassed. The boys were getting way more attention because they were more boisterous and misbehaving, frankly. And so we invented the Drama Girls program. My wife, Tria, invented the Drama Girls program. And the Drama Girls program was a partnership between a middle school girl and a professional artist. And they stuck together for an entire year in order to generate a final project in the end. But as soon as a kind of safe space was created with these women, these girls, rather, all this stuff came out, right? Rape, incest, attempted suicide. And we began the kind of heartbreaking process of understanding what we could deal with and what we couldn't deal with. We dealt with that spontaneous human leakage. We made some choices about it. But in the end, we continued, I think, to serve those girls. Later, we developed a school partnership program with the Audubon School, and it was all based around the idea that we could somehow create a program that changed the culture of a public school, that broke down the barriers between classrooms, between teachers and students, between teachers and teachers, between teachers and principals, between teachers and superintendents, principals and superintendents, all that stuff. If we could somehow channel a bunch of creative energy and artistic energy toward the product of celebrating the graduation of 8th grade while incorporating the standardized curriculum, we could make a real dent in the culture of a public school. And so we are doing that at the Audubon School in partnership with the Audubon School in Roscoe Village. This was a show that happened in Pington Park. Now, Pington Park's just south of 18th Street. It's a beautiful park, and it sits between the Chicago River, and there's an L train that runs, and below the L train is a freight line, and at the far end of the park, you can kind of see it behind here, there's an elevator bridge that has a commuter line on it. So it's in the middle of this nexus of Chicago's great transportation systems. And the house on that elevator bridge was really the inspiration for the show. And the show was about this psychotic, love-torn mayor who was called the Boss Man, who, because of his love loss, leads to a kind of accidental homicide. The funeral for the victim of that homicide came down the Chicago River. Now, because it sat in the middle of transportation systems, we had to stop in some ways the action of the drama for any given system, right? So when the train came by, we had one response. And the response to the L was for everybody to stop whatever they were doing, no matter what it was, turn to the L and wave. It was the kind of hopeful but fruitless wave of a child at a passing train conductor, right? And we did this for months. It became completely spontaneous. We'd be in the middle of a production meeting and I'll stop and turn and wave. So on the final evening of the final performance, the performers turned to the train to wave, and they saw in the train windows pasted cardboard hands waving back. It was beautiful. The connection was made. This is the funeral that came along the river, and you can see at the top of the bridge there the house that really inspired the entire show. Creative solutions are only possible if failure is embraced. Nothing new will be found without first evoking the distinct possibility of failure. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. This is my son, the baseball player. Look at him. He, like most of us, is discouraged at every turn to avoid failure, right? On his all-important standardized tests, it's better not to guess than to venture forth a guess and get it wrong. So a wrong answer is literally minus points, whereas a blank space, no effort, is accountingly neutral. Look at him. He's scared to death and feverishly patriotic, right? He's the perfect Tea Party stooge. My God, it wounds me. So I'm so glad he's playing baseball now. So this is a cry to fail, to try and to fail, to endorse failure, to applaud failure. It means somebody's trying. Thank you.